thinking about as people choose to come to Olathe and as people choose to stay in Olathe, what would be ways that we could enhance this leave so that comparatively we are pretty amazing with the leave that our employees can have as a benefit of working here. So throughout the policy, you'll see that leave has been supplanted by the words paid time off. And that is because in our concept of our proposal, there's no discretionary or non-discretionary leave. It's lumped together into a title called paid time off. That first paragraph is moved up from another page, and it just defines paid time off as a day that you are absent from your job and your duty. Going to the next part of that first page, you'll see paid time off inserted where leave was. We are proposing a change in accrual of leave. So that is on page 1 of your paper document at the very bottom. Just shifting the time frame for when people accrue additional days of leave. So currently, if you are an employee for 10 years, you accrue an additional day of leave. We're for years of employment. And the same thing with the 15 years, move that to 10. Just hoping that that has an impact on retention of staff in the district.
May I add something a little bit?
Please.
We got the chance to attend a retention summit. I remember the words. I feel like that was a couple of weeks ago, but it could have been 6 months ago. And when we were looking at that state level data, we really saw that we're losing teachers in the 4 to 11 year range. So, maybe that teacher that's in the 4th year that, is like, I need something to try to hang in another year. It just kind of gives them like a little incentive.
I think that you're betting that it would be a positive. If you turn to your second page of your paper document, you'll see that the whole language that deals with discretionary leave is struck. Down at the bottom of that, though, there's some reordering of for bereavement leave. And I'm going to be the first one to admit that redlining is not my strength. In the first grade classroom, we really didn't use it a lot. So there are errors in the formatting and numbering and lettering in here, and I'm sorry about that. Underneath the part about bereavement leave, there is a section then that was discretionary leave, which now has been reworded as paid time off, and it outlines times when a staff member would need to use a 2-for-1 deduction and leave. And those are consistent with what we currently have in the agreement. There's no change. So those are the first 10 days of the school term, the last 15 days of the student's term, days prior to or after a holiday, and parent-teacher conferences and professional development days. Then there's an exception where a staff member may request to be let out of that through human resources, but that is all still in our agreement currently. In section 3, which is prolonged absences, there's some additional language that's blue that we're proposing or changing significantly. So item A still talks about if you're going to be gone 3 or more days, and I know this is personal leave, but you would use personal leave for any reason to be gone. If you're gone 3 or more days, then the district does have the opportunity to request information from your healthcare provider. And those also could be requested to ensure that you're able to come back to work and fulfill your job responsibilities. Item B is where employees would be afforded the opportunity to pre-put in for leave, so at least 2 weeks in advance. And they can take a sequence of 4 or 5 days in a row without needing to give a reason. So in my head, I'm thinking, gosh, I'm sick, I wake up sick, I'm not putting in 2 weeks ahead of time for that leave, I'm still going to be using my paid time off. But if I know that my family's taking a family vacation and I'd like to take a block of 5 days, I could do that and put that in advance and then not have to give a reason for that. If someone doesn't use that, because not everyone is going to use large blocks of time, then we're proposing that they could double up to 2 days of leave at the end of the year to go into their accrual. So I know in our paid time off committee meeting, we had a lot of discussion about would there be overusage of this. This could potentially help people understand that if they don't use those large blocks of days, then they could benefit from that. So it should be A, B, C, D under there. So resignation or termination, voids all accumulated leave, still in our agreement, just paid time off is substituted. And then under D, we're proposing an additional bit of language where not only could you exchange accumulated days for your HRA at retirement, but also at the end of the year, if you have some paid time off left that you haven't used, that you could exchange up to 5 days at these 75% of the substitute rate at the end of a contract year. Our thoughts behind that are there at times are people who are not retiring, but they are leaving the district. You have their absence patterns that we would rather have them in the classroom through the end of their contract year and not just using up their leave. So if those days have a value to that employee, we believe they would be in the classroom or be at their job site and not using that leave. Under section 4, there is just one change from leave to paid time off. Under childbirth and adoption leave, a change to paid time off, and then we are proposing a consideration. If I'm an individual employee, I can use up to 60 days for childbirth or adoption. But if I am a married employee of the district, 2-employee family, if you will, I can only use a combination of 120 days of leave. So we're proposing that each of those individuals, I can only use up to 80 days combined. So we're proposing that each individual be able to use both of their 60-day allotment for childbirth or adoption of each child. Section 6 is non-FMLA medical leave. Change in lingo. There's no change in section 7, which is prolonged absences requiring Board of Education action. There is a lingo change in leave of absence with guarantee of employment. There's no change in section 8, professional leave, out of district professional activities, and no change in section 9, donor leave for organ tissue or bone marrow transplant. No change in jury duty. No change in non-school community activities. So that leaves us up to military leave. There is one change to paid time off, and then the reference to the inclusive language that we'd already worked through. In political activity leave, there are some changes with paid time off. No change in sabbatical leave. Then few minor changes in other approved absences. Policy. Just any questions you would have about thinking or proposal?
How will you know that they're taking 3 consecutive days because of an illness? If they don't have to code it as discretionary.
So I think, because I don't work in HR, so I don't know, I'm just making this up. They're gone on the 4th day, then someone is going to contact them and say, you didn't put in for that 2-week leave. You didn't let us know ahead of time. We need to know you're okay and you can come back.
Gotcha.
That's mine.
So in essence, an individual is not going to be able to take more than 3 days without it tripping
They put it in beforehand.
if they don't give 2 weeks notice.
Yeah. And I don't know how that impacts the processes that you all have in place, so that's something we would want to think through together.
Did the number 15 that you referenced for 15 days per school year, did that come from the 13 that you're offered first plus 2 personal? Kind of came up.
Good enough, yep.
13 plus 2. The 4 or 5 days maybe is a little confusing.
Can you tell me where you're looking?
Prolonged absences end of year and then
Page 3.
up to and then whatever number.
So,
You're saying a maximum of 5 days consecutively could be taken.
yes,
Is that how I should, right?
right, so in a 4 or 5 days. Thinking that we do that being put in for 4 days ahead of time, that's not the 3 days that you might be gone for
This is
illness.
3 days.
That was the thinking behind that. Oh, and the stars being, I would imagine the employee needs to notify someone 2 weeks in advance, but the process, we need to identify. You know, is it, yeah. Is it subservices? Is it their administrator? Is it, so that process then again.
Mhm.
And they can use that one time for you, right?
One time.
I have a little worry about the not having blackout days and that individuals could take those days at a 2-to-1. I get that there's a little bit of a sacrifice on having to give 2 days, but I think about like parent teacher conferences. And I worry about the message that would send to our community and our parents when individuals can be gone for whatever reason during a time that we've specifically denoted for our parents to be able to meet with teachers.
I would imagine that this it currently happens if people are sick during that time.
But I think, you know, as a parent, you understand that versus I decided to go on vacation and we already had some time off. And so, you know what I mean? I didn't have to use as many days because I already have some days.
And then one more, I guess, on section 3, for the exchange of up to 5 days or 75% of substitute rates, that would be at the end of every contract year, not just if you're leaving the district.
No.
Okay.
And you're thinking the long-term sub rate of pay? Or the daily rate?
I have no problem.
Okay. That'd be some else. Okay.
I would imagine that, maybe after your presentation, we all might caucus and see if we have more questions.
Yeah.
That'd be.
Yes, I
This is kind of.
Grab the wireless.
Yeah. Great. Oh, you want me to actually try?
I'm sorry. it's all right.
Yeah, our clean copies go one way in your presentation.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Cross credit. Oh.
Want to make sure we were.
This looks like current on real red line.
Hi.
I'm good. I'm track local.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, it changed codes.
It's just not.
We start inviting Josh to these.
Well, because you remember.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Very good.
They're the clean of the red line.
So here is our proposal, and I started with some foundation and background, just to lay a little bit of the kind of basis for some of the information we included in our proposal. So on the left, you can see the current allotment of days that are provided, both here, we're on the bottom in pink, and in all of our neighboring, Johnson County school districts. So, you can see the other districts, except for Blue Valley, do, utilize paid time off. They range between 10 and 12 days of paid time off that they offer. Blue Valley still has theirs segmented into illness and personal. They have 5 illness and 7 personal. And they're given 12 days. They have a 13th day that automatically gets put into their sick leave pay. And then you can see our range that currently stands between 15 and 17 days. So we do have more days than all of our neighboring districts. Leanne had mentioned we had a PTO committee that had gotten together and we had done a survey and tried to kind of glean some priorities and then also just some misconceptions that we could gather from that survey insight. And so really the priorities that came forward from those responses was the importance of maintaining the same number of days of leave, offering the added days for years of service, so giving that additional day after 10 years and then 15 years. And then just kind of the overall message of recognizing our educators as professionals. Some of the misconceptions we were able to gather from either the responses or even the written remarks that were given was not an understanding of what the difference is between discretionary and non-discretionary. Kind of the basis for blackout days and why those would be needed, or why they're identified or how they're identified. And that when you go to pay, that you could not ask for any reason ever as to why someone is. The next box is information, just as kind of the background again, in terms of how many substitutes we utilize in a year. I thought this just might be interesting for us to kind of have a little bit of an idea. So you can see we went back to the 21-22 school year, and this is just daily substitutes. So this is not any, this is no more, this is all of those subs that are used for less than 10 days, basically, because when they get to 10 days, they bump over to that long sub. So in 21-22, we had 37,402 substitutes used. In 22, it was 40,307. And so far this year, we're at 28,964. When we look at the substitute costs, last year we spent $5,265,252 on subs. And that also includes stipends that were paid to individuals, teachers, educators in the classroom that had to cover when there's not a sub available. So I think it's important to note that cost, just because there's a cost that comes with everything, obviously. And that is one of the things you'll see that we identified as something we want to make sure we think about. So as we were thinking about our interests, number one, of course, is ensuring that our students are supported by a quality educator or a substitute. We also want to make sure that we're supporting our educators' health and personal needs. We want to offer flexibility for educators to take the time necessary to care for themselves and their families. We want to treat educators as professional in making the determination regarding the use of their leave. We do want to continue to focus on the emphasis on educator attendance at professional learning and parent-teacher conferences. And lastly, we want to provide an option for review and reflection of PTO policy. So as you go through our red line version, you'll see that we denoted some specific language in there for a sunset clause for this after next year. So that if we, heaven forbid, quadruple and we're at, $20 million that we've spent on subs, we obviously need to kind of take a look at things. So I'll be happy to go through the red line version. So, we actually kept in ours, we moved from illness bereavement, we added paid time off. And this again is policy, the same way that you all had shared as well, GBCCA. And, we denoted paid time off, we did keep discretionary and non-discretionary in our policy, because we kept blackout days, so I'll kind of walk through that as well. So, first page here, I did a little bit of changing of order of some things. And I'm gonna echo what Leanne said, although I didn't teach first grade, I am no expert on redlining either. So you're gonna look at even the clean version and be like, wow, we went from AD to 1, 2, all kinds of funky things, but, of course we can work on that. So we did keep, the language in terms of, the number of days, so we did not change those. We kept the additional day at 10 years of service, and then another day at 15 years of service. You know what time? Sorry, I think I've skipped my last slide, which is the most helpful one. Sorry, I'm switching gears on it. I'm like, why do I do like that? Okay. So here's the highlights. All right, this will be a lot easier. We moved all of the current leave to paid time off. Those in their first 9 years will have 15 days, then 10 to 14, 16, and then 15 plus 7. We did continue with the 2 banks of leave. So we have current paid time off, and then that's organized. It's not allotted into discretionary and non-discretionary, but when someone submits an absence, they would have to identify whether it's a discretionary or a non-discretionary reason for being gone. We kept the definition for discretionary is the same as what is currently personal leave, and then non-discretionary is illness bereavement. And then there still would be an accumulative non-discretionary leave, the same as we have now, so that staff can continue to maintain. We did maintain all of the blackout dates. And the parameters around those, in terms of the discretionary leave would not be allowed on those, and non-discretionary. So if you're sick, obviously you would to be gone. We did continue also that special HR approval if there's a discretionary reason that was out of the control of the educator. We set a requirement for a 2-day notice expectation for all paid time off. This stemmed from a couple of things. Number one was the importance of notifying our substitutes office with enough time to be able to get a sub. We have a significant concern right now with a high number of individuals not submitting a request for a leave day until the morning of or the night before. And it significantly reduces our odds of finding a substitute to fill the position. I had a conversation with Shelley Longstreth, and she said, you know, here's the struggle. Our subs are just like all of us. They're planning ahead. And so when they see there's not a job open in the next couple of days, they're going to move on to Blue Valley or Shawnee Mission to see if there's a job there. We also noted that you had to use your current paid time off before you can move to your cumulative. We also had that all of your unused PTO would move to that cumulative pay. We did a maximum of 3 consecutive days, and we did that for both the discretionary and non-discretionary reasons for being gone. We stuck with the 3 days, as we talked about here a little bit ago, keeping in line with our FMLA parameters and the requirement for a doctor's note if you're going to be on that. Some of the language we removed was the tracking of personal days by building. That's written in there now with some of those caps that were listed. We took all of that out. We also took out the language for turning in 2 days of sick leave for 1 day of personal leave. And then also the providing for payment for unused personal leave, since it's all going to be turned paid time off. And then, as I mentioned, that sunset clause at the end of next year, so that we certain. I'll go through the red line. So the first page really outlines the same language we currently have, just moving the language to paid time off, providing that option to use it in full day or half day increments. We have the language in here that unless unavoidable or out of the employee's control, that a minimum of 48 hours must be provided. We felt like we needed to provide some language as well, that if that is seen as a pattern that we have, there's not notice given for 4 instances or taken more than 2 blackout days in a contract year, that we could then initiate impact of disciplinary procedures if we see that as a pattern with an individual. The language about using the current paid time off before you go to accrued is included here. And then that language regarding the 3 consecutive days. And then that same language is currently a doctor's note for that non-discretionary. And then this language here, we just changed to non-discretionary paid time off and kept the same definition that's currently in our language. For basically that bereavement leave. This language here was actually what we saw up above. So we did a little bit of reordering there. The personal business leave, you can see we changed to discretionary paid time off. And then added that language again here about the maximum of 3 consecutive days. Then because we kept blackout days in there, as you get to that next page, we included again that definition for non-discretionary paid time off and kind of the procedures that would still be something that would be allowed to be taken for these reasons on blackout day. Keep scrolling, you can see the blackout procedures when it comes to that discretionary leave. And then I didn't go beyond to the remainder of those other kind of subsets when we got into long-term leave. So that's where ours.
We had talked a bit during the paid time off committee about just kind of thinking about more notice that subservices has, being able to fill those jobs, and wondering, we gotta wonder if that would potentially, if they're placed sooner, would that have a positive impact on subs being moved or pulled or last minute? And so I'm wondering if that, about your thinking behind the 2-day notice.
I think our thought was that we would have better odds of having a higher fill rate overall. You know, that last minute movement is happening now because of the volume of the number of open positions we have at 6 o'clock in the morning. And so if we didn't have as many of those, there would be far less of that movement, which we know is a frustration when you have done the right thing and you've planned ahead. And you've got your sub lined up and you know that sub go through a classroom and your kind of protocols, and then they get moved somewhere else. So that was our thought process behind that.
The part of the language, about disciplinary procedures, is that referring to the discipline policy in the mediation agreement?
With that discipline component, would the vision be there's still something when I'm putting in a day that I am distinguishing this is non-discretionary versus discretionary, so that, because my concern with what I'm seeing just in the language would be if someone's sick 2 times on a blackout day, I wouldn't want that language to trigger for them. I don't think that's the intent.
Right. You're correct. Yeah, that would not be good.
Then you talk about the 2 buckets of time still. I feel like there's a piece I'm not understanding about why that's necessary if we're in a paid time off model. Like why would we need to track 2 different categories of leave?
Well, the only time that it would, number one, so that when we know that somebody's out for non-discretionary reasons, that's an illness reason, that it triggers that FMLA piece, just as it does now.
But
It feels like just a relabel, I think, and like, instead of calling it illness, it's now just non-discretionary. Like, I'm not seeing the difference.
Well, unlike now, where when your leave is allotted to you, it's given to you as personal and illness, you're going to get it as paid time off. The time that it matters for how it's labeled is only when you submit your absence, so that we know if you're gone for 3 days, 4 days because of a non-discretionary or an illness reason, then we know, hey, we need to start following up to find out if you're now entering into a need for FMLA. So it's still given to you as a whole bucket.
It kind of makes me think of a timeline, like they should be subsets, so it's all paid time off. But then after, once it's a deemed paid time off, then it falls into one of those 2 categories. Is that what you're saying, Michelle? So the reason for the rename is for the FML, so yeah, it's all paid time off, but it will fall in one of these 2 categories. Because I think that they need it for documentation purposes for the other laws that fall into suit.
Well, and if we have blackout days, obviously, if it's a non-discretionary reason that you're going to be gone, that's not going to trigger a question or, hey, what's going on?
If you have an employee who's ill, but the employer doesn't know, then we have an obligation to transition, potentially to have that leave protected by FML, which can be rather quick, 3 to 4 days. But if you don't have the ability on the employer side to confirm, oh gosh, Jenny is out because she's had some surgery, but no one really knew then. But having the ability then at least to track it, to say, oh, this is regarding an illness, or maybe it's a broken leg, something out, then the leave specialist in Michelle's group can then track that way. If it's not categorized that way, it's difficult to determine if it's related to an illness or related to something else. Is that, did I get that right, Michelle? That's kind of generally.
Well, I think, I'm also thinking this from the perspective of an HR team that has to be able to monitor that, if we don't co-work in any way, shape, or form, either way, it has to happen all the time with every lead, anything that goes 2 days.
I understand why, like when we're putting in leave, we would need to put in a reason that would put it in one of those 2 buckets. The piece I think I'm not understanding is there's parts in your proposed language where you talk about paid time off rolling over into some other category called non-discretionary leave. And I'm confused about the distinction between those 2
It's just
things.
that is the same.
The accrued leave.
That is accrued leave, but just as we have now. We currently have that where your leave, moves over and
Sure.
it becomes more sick time, they have more sick leave. that would be the same as with this. Your paid time off that's unused at the end of the year would roll into your accrued leave, which in essence becomes non-discretionary.
So the intent would be like someone who's, if say you've been in the district for like 18 years and have a pretty big number of days saved up, those aren't just all magically paid time off days then that I could, you know, take
Right.
every Wednesday for a year. Got it. Okay, I think I understand. Well, just,
Curious. You're gonna leave.
just pretty much, it's like the paid time off would be an upper limit on the number of discretionary days you would expect someone to take. Got it. The last question I have relates to the sunset. Makes sense, you'd want to revisit. In the event that the policy sunset then turns into a rollback, how does that, all these employees that we have transferred into a paid time off / non-discretionary, do we want to make sure we have language that's correctly protecting that back into the old system in some way?
Well, and what, I mean, this.
It might be simple. Yeah.
Right, or, yeah. And we would want to have somewhat of a backup plan on the technology side of that as
Yeah.
well.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Is FMLA an automatic after 3 days, or does the employer have some discretion on that point when they require documentation? I don't know.
I'm looking at Michelle, she's looking at me.
Yeah, I think it's 3 days.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah,
Oh. Well,
yeah.
That's been what.
It's an easier situation when employees requested it, yeah, that form, but then alternatively, what triggers that day? I had 3 days in my head, I can Google here and do some quick research. It's pretty quick, it really is, it's much quick, you know, you think of a situation, I've always thought, oh, it's something, maybe it's a protracted illness, and, you know, no, it's actually rather fast. Or can be. And then you also have a situation with potentially an employee having intermittent FML, which is kind of, you know, maybe an employee's been off, you know, a couple of days a week and a couple of days the next week, but that pattern could show that maybe that employee's actually entitled to intermittent FMLA. So you need to make sure that's coded right.
Man, what do you think? Do we want to talk about this one, or do we want to do the next presentation so we can talk about it all at once, or?
I think I would rather do this one and then print it. Yeah.
These can get too big.
Yeah.
And I'll
Be
be
like, let's go back to page 1 of this draft, you know, like.
Yeah.
right,
Oh, right.
Okay.
And we could always just set an established time, do the next presentation, and then have a session after. I don't know. So,
Another
But yeah,
thing we can maybe set, make sure we get at least this presentation
Yep.
done, then we can
Yeah.
work outside of the.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that-
So we want to say like 5:30, just to be safe with the other presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, great.
Okay.
Like in a good way, Lori, or like?
They'll pay that.
Did they pick up
See
the
my
one day?
picture. Any picture that I'm paying for, apparently you can't smile at all for. Or one that I did myself. Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, so, just in, I guess we'll summarize where we're at.
Very good.
So, we started obviously looking at your proposal compared to ours, and obviously a lot of commonality,
Yeah.
right? And I think that there's, several items that certainly getting on board with, and that we started looking into some of them, like the, for example, the 75% payout. Obviously, we want to put a little pen and paper there just to see what that cost may be compared to our sub cost too.
Yeah.
And try and just do a little math there. And then also the discretionary, non-discretionary, if we were to do away with that, just how do we handle MLA and some other things to look into that. So we were in the middle of writing kind of proposal, but we had at a time. So again, I think there's a lot of common ground there. And so we'll have a written proposal that blends some of those things and some kind of first thing next week.
Would you send me your red line version?
As long as you don't mind.
Well, you might get it back with my red line. What happened?
I don't know. Yes. Yeah, we noticed a lot of commonalities as well, and would like to talk about a document where we could like really outline the parts that are the same and look at that. I think we had a couple questions. Let's see, I can go back and find.
And you're looking for that, I can ask the disciplinary one.
Okay.
Yeah, when an employee does not follow current policy for leave, is the current practice to follow the disciplinary policy?
Yes, but I think that because our current policy doesn't have any deadlines for noticing things, that very rarely, if ever, happens. Does that make sense?
It's not really ever applied
No,
to
because,
that situation.
right. Right.
My question was about under, we currently have in our policy, but it's struck in yours and it might be moved, but it might be struck. Under 5, under blackout days. So where currently we have the option of taking personal leave, enrolling as 2 illness bereavement leave days.
Yeah, we did take that out.
Okay.
Yes.
And then did you also take out the option of rolling the days into the double days into the retirement account as well?
Yes, because that was specific to personal days.
And so then, but maintaining then is any accrued days at retirement are eligible for HRA. Is it possible that someone might see that as a reduction in days that they could potentially accrue?
That they could accrue?
That they
Yes.
could put into the HRA?
Because they can't convert.
Yes.
Yes.
Personals are, I mean, part of the total of 15, which
Right.
can't, that entire amount.
Mhm.
And I think part of it is our current policy is obviously much more restrictive. illness, bereavement, and personal. So the idea behind that was to incentivize them not to use the 2 personal days, right?
Right, and so they actually have the opportunity to roll any of their 15, 16, 17 with your policy if they don't use it.
Correct.
Which I think we had a question about the max that you're considering for the 3 consecutive days used as discretionary. It's really hard to say. And how that plays in with FMLA as far as back in your processes that you have to keep track of. I know we had more of this.
Basically is if the automated process that sends an email to teachers falsely identifies some people who maybe shouldn't actually
That's
end
what
up
it was.
taking FMLA, is harm done to someone in that process? Like imagining a world where just that email of, hey, you might be eligible for FMLA went to anyone who took 3+ days. Does that hurt anyone or anything?
No, but I think then it creates a workflow for us. And that doesn't need to be created.
Okay.
Because then we're following up to figure out. Does that make
Because
sense?
it's the follow-up piece, it's not the initial auto.
It's FML is for a serious health condition.
Right.
So,
Right.
so.
Would there be another way of collecting that information when somebody puts in a leave? Rather than having to say like discretionary, non-discretionary, it's like another, just like question that goes along with it. So like keeping the idea that like PTO is PTO, but like I put in the date and then there's the drop down. So like if it is for medical, then like, because essentially what the 2 things are, if it really is just to trigger knowing what, like, that doesn't have to be a whole category. That could just be a question.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay,
Quite honestly.
yeah, I mean, that's probably an Oracle thing too,
Yeah.
right? Like.
Well, right.
It kind of goes back to what you said. Really, the concern is that bias continues to call it discretionary, non-discretionary.
Yeah.
Versus if you have a drop down to say it's
Yes.
because of
Yes.
illness or something.
Right.
Yes, right.
Right. You're not using, it means the same thing. The non-discretionary seems to think it's illness. Well, illness really, because that's what non-discretionary is equal to. Illness in our system currently, but it's just the wording. Not seen like the old system.
Yes, and I think being transparent about it, I think part of the concern is that honest people will be honest about it, but the dishonest will continue to be dishonest about it. Right? Like if I can choose which category it goes into, then if I wanted to be dishonest, I would choose the one that's greater benefit to myself. Like
Right.
in the end. So if we take away that piece of it, then maybe there's a way of meeting other interests and needs in a different way versus having the separate categories.
Yeah.
So something to consider.
So I just want to make sure I'm hearing that right. So I think as an employee, you'd still want to identify it, but it all comes out of the one pool versus the 2.
Yes.
Because I was thinking too, is if it just had a signal, as if you marked illness and it was 3 consecutive, could it kick back out and say
Yes.
something?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for putting that.
No, I see a lot of those, so that's what I was gonna say,
Yeah.
from the admin standpoint, we see them coming through, so you'd be able to monitor that through that way too.
And then I'm guessing there would still be some sort of like spreadsheet database that could be produced and to be able to sort those things, right? Like,
And there is a submission piece.
Right.
There is a submission piece, if they wanted to add that condition, if it exceeded that, it would allow. it to be that. Mhm. Would help, you know.
But Julia, what you're saying is that the only time that drop down or that option comes up is when I go to put in a fourth consecutive day.
Oh, I wasn't even
I think
thinking it would be that
anytime.
It's
complicated.
any day, but the problem is it goes after two different categories right now, whereas it wouldn't matter what they marked, because you wouldn't have people lying, because
Yeah.
guess what, it still comes out of the same pool.
There's
Yeah.
one starting
Yeah.
box.
Exactly, but then it could just be like a search criteria when it, on the back end of it.
Mhm.
Again, I don't know what the back end of it looks like,
Yeah, if
you know,
it
like,
exceeded
I'm just
30,
thinking
you
of
have to
other
provide
forms.
the documentation for it.
Yeah.
Notify, da.
Exactly, yeah. It'd just be like intake questions, right? Like as you're filling
It's
everything.
the same
out.
way we were trying to designate. Discretionary,
Mhm.
discretionary, it's just calling it something different.
And just
On the back.
putting it under one pool, yeah.
I think the optics of that is much better.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I was
Yes.
referring back to what she had said
Yeah.
earlier. Because it would still call it out as discretionary. It seemed like it changed.
Mhm.
Or it seemed like there's
Right.
monitoring which kind.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and where I think, yeah, and again, it's one of those things, like, it's just the vocabulary of it,
Yes.
but.
The
I think it
function of
does
it would be
matter.
the same, it's just.
Yes.
Being kind of a new word, would that mean that we would want to look at that appendix on 74 where it does separate out those discretionary and non-discretionary? Is that within our group too? Okay. Mhm.
Yeah, this policy may impact, where we end up may impact the retirement policy, might lead us on.
I started down that
Yes.
rabbit hole, which is why I also stopped before you did. I was like, okay, again.
Oh, I guess that was another, question too, is that we addressed, childbirth and adoption. Is that something we want to continue, like, discussing? That wasn't included in your draft, but
Oh, because
with the number of days, I think, yeah,
The two employee family.
just to kind of put that on our radar.
Yeah, that's something we talked about. We didn't quite get that
Okay,
far. in the
that's fine.
document, We'd have to talk about that.
Come back next
Right back,
week.
yeah.
Anything else on leaves? You want us to go, I think we're
Yes,
first on the
sure.
agenda. Leaves. There is no red line version. English that we worked on. Yeah, I was gonna just. Right, this is, so we had talked in another bargaining session about, we had talked in a previous bargaining session about, being able to find a way to keep an employee harmless who is for leave costs they are, involved in this situation. So this is our first draft at this proposal. And it outlines that any employee who is serving in an official capacity for the school district and is assaulted by a student, parent, or guardian of a student, community member, another employee, or outside intruder, and as a result of such injury has a loss of time in performing their duties, shall not lose pay or leave days because of such incident. Any leave days temporarily used to prevent loss of income during the workers' compensation process will be restored to the employee's accrued leave balance. If the employee is out of leave, any loss of income will be restored to the employee. The Board of Education will reimburse any employee for clothing or personal property damaged, destroyed, or stolen as a result of violence, assault, or physical abuse sustained in the course of their employment. The maximum reimbursement paid by the district for items damaged, destroyed, or stolen by such act shall not exceed $1,000 per incident. Reimbursement for losses in excess of $1,000 will be covered to the extent allowable under the district's insurance policy. So we don't want to impact the process that we learned about from our workers' compensation department to be able to get people paid while they're out on leave. Our intent is for them just to be made whole.
I think that gets really hairy. When you get into situations where somebody is out for a really prolonged period of time or because you're gonna naturally get into workman's comp and start crossing over, you know what I mean? That's my.
I'm learning. Are you saying, you know, we have kind of the 5 days, we have the 21 days. Are you saying if it's a 6-month long-term kind of workers' comp, the 2/3 pay that,
Right.
are you trying to make whole the 1/3 that I believe being used in that long-term? Or are you just in the process of the 21 days? That first kind of those crucial 5 days really, because workers' comp
They
kicks in
automatically use their leave at the beginning,
yeah.
but they're also not made whole through the workers' compensation process, is my understanding.
And is the process, you're saying the whole time they're being paid through workers' comp, or when they get to their 21st day and they get their check for the first 5 days and they've already been?
That is a great question.
Okay.
I think what we're intending here is to just build frameworks we can look at. How do we make sure that they're either compensated fully or their leave is full, it's not kind of above 100% compensation if you will. And that's either rebanking those days or a compensation.
Yeah, I think the intent is really that the employee at the end of however long that process is, ends up financially and in terms of leave in the same place they would have been had it not.
This is kind of a larger term. And so when I read the first part, I think there's physical and there's probably verbal. And so if I had someone that felt verbally assaulted, could they use days to say, I need time or I need to go visit with a counselor? And I feel like the second portion of yours talks more physical. And I believe you're talking about all physical. Is that the intent?
Do we file, I don't know, do we have workers, can someone file for workers' comp or?
I learned that today.
Good. That's what I was kind of curious.
You'll see in my very brief. You did a lot better. physical injury, because workers' comp really only covers physical
Physical,
injury, so
Yeah,
I added the word physical.
Yeah.
To it.
that's a good.
Both happen in the work.
Yeah.
Just one of
Sure.
them.
Maximum reimbursement paid by the district for personal items, right? I'm just saying that just to say it more than anything. I think that's implied, but we have lots of other items.
Sure, for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
We talk about a personal item being stolen, and that is that I mean, are we thinking that that's when somebody's had to file a police report, or?
If something is stolen, that probably would, require that. I would imagine though, if they're assaulted, there also might be a police report. And then the theft would be included in that report.
I'm trying to figure out. Like restitution, as if someone is convicted of a crime, they pay restitution. Well, that's maybe an insurance question, looking at John. You know, I don't know if we can think through that, maybe it wasn't,
We can read bottom section.
yeah,
Insurance policies.
yeah, there's some, yeah. Okay. Anyway, I'm kind of thinking out loud, I guess, more than asking a question there. Yeah.
Is you're wondering about how does the district's policy apply if there is reimbursement paid, is the district then made whole for that?
I think I have segregation.
You get an answer, right?
Yeah. Yeah, just. As I said, man, you get the gold star because mine's even shorter. Wrong reasons. Thomas McGee acts as our workers administrator. Almost everything has to be done by them to make sure because they're in charge of the plan. We have a board policy GAOE or workers' comp. And I was focusing in on kind of the conversations we were focusing in conversations from last year, just added this verbiage that if slash when an employee is physically injured as a result of a student assault, I wasn't thinking the broader definition, but I understand what you're saying. And supporting medical provider documentation is provided, indicating the need to be absent from work. The thinking behind that is we're encouraging everybody to go, if you've been injured, you have to go see a doctor for the workers' comp process. They would naturally have that. Then up to 5 days of leave would be submitted to the staff member in lieu of any deduction from employees' leave. So we were addressing that short-term where workers' comp doesn't kick in and you're out, you could be out 5 days and I'm okay now. Because writer, if this is, I can't prove this is accurate. What I was hearing from Thomas McGee is unless you have a concussion, a lot of things end before you get to that 21st day. You're back to work quicker. So you'd focus on that shorter term. But I totally understand what you're getting at with if it's a longer term making whole. I did learn workers' comp benefits are tax free. So when we say 1/3 of its leave and 2/3 of its pay, you're actually getting more than two. You could end up making more money in workers' comp if you have enough leave. I hate to say that, but there is an incentive to stay, so to speak, long term. We chose this particular policy because it would apply to all employees. As it sits outside of negotiated agreement, just a board policy, so I'm sorry, we were recommending trying to look at this particular policy. And I had thought, we had thought through in which the property.
Okay.
Your language specifies speed results.
Really was, I thought the previous conversations, so.
Okay.
Last year, that's your
Yeah,
idea. It's just within the work that,
While performing duties.
given the duties, it could happen.
I have a logistical, like, or, I don't know, maybe a logistical question. So if this is for an addition to the board policy, is that something like? Are we, as a professional counsel, bringing this to the board? Are we?
Mr. Attorney, I don't think technically we need ratification, we just go to the board and make the change, right? Because it's not sitting as a.
So it's an awful board to change you.
Yeah.
So if we
See,
come
the
to,
board
this is acceptable language, we just.
ready.
Because the one tricky thing with workers' comp is you do have to apply.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the fact that that law changes frequently to be able to just that to stay with the law, if we put something in which agreement that would contradict then any law changes would be problematic.
It's true. And I honestly don't know, if you guys did some research, how the workers' comp rules work down, if a parent did a intruder, I assume all. So I'll just look. See if there's any-
What we were assuming.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
And as long as it's in your, like.
Within the scope of the. And maybe there's a better way to word that too.
Right.
It would have within. So upper performing duties or something like that.
So that will work with them before the next meeting and see.
For the top, and then goes on to specify.
Well, they can
Which
deny-
may not be
deny
exclusive.
too.
Yeah.
Right.
So you could be more general to, well,
Standing on a rolling chair.
Yeah.
Well, that's, yeah. I have never done
You're a first grade teacher, right?
We believe the number of hours it took just to get one sentence.
Yeah.
It's complicated. I'm glad I know.
So next week, I think we need to get on Wednesday. Or I think I hear the intent from both groups is to come back with commonalities in leave language, be able to hammer that out, as well as more information on workers' comp, assault language. What's next, like, for us to talk about? I have an idea, but we'll to hear others' ideas.
cheer yours.
Yeah.
I think we've got to start whittling away at what we can love you for, especially for our elementary folks. And
Yeah.
get some certainty.
And that's kind of what you're structuring.
Shelby said it really well. She said, like, our whole world is unraveling, as we know. And so that's just not a good place for people to be in. I don't know. I mean, I think the discussion here, we in the task force, and Todd chime in here, you know, we talked a lot about what is bargainable, what is not bargainable, what is within the purview of that task force and what needs to be talked about here. There certainly was a delineation between the work that that group could do and then what their hands were tied because it was a bargainable item.
Not trying to predict the future or anything, but I do know that there is a sense of urgency from all elements.
Probably admin. and-
Everybody.
Yeah,
Yes.
all the people.
There's a collective interest in trying to get.
Yeah.
Well, so maybe, obviously, we have what we talked
Yeah.
about. Certainly have that means that will certainly be most.
Yeah. But it would be time well spent.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
All right, well, we just set the agenda.
6:02, look at us. Thanks, guys.
So she's so good at keeping our website like updated with notes and stuff, but her question is, how many sets of minutes on the?
Like the history.
Yeah. So, my thought was, if we can keep notes current for the current bargain.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
And then why, and then
Yes, so-
we'll,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
so then I think our current year then started in October, so I'll just let her know anything prior to that. I mean, we have minutes in our T drive.
Right, sure, we
for-
have the ultimate record.
Yeah, but we need what's current.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you,
Nope,
sorry.
that sounds great.
I would ask.
Hi, my name is Leanne Rogers, and I currently serve as president of the Olathe National Education Association. This is my 37th year in the district, and most of my experience in the classroom was in primary grades with first and second graders. But I am so honored to serve in this role as the president of this amazing organization. You know, one of the great things about Olathe NEA is that as the full-time release president, I am able to respond to members' needs immediately and have conversations with leaders across our district to help them understand the impact that decisions and incidents have on the working conditions of our educators. I'm lucky that I get to sit down with our superintendent once a week, unless we have something big come up, and we just talk through what's happening in the district. What are the impacts on our staff? I feel like I have the opportunity to bring a human story to that conversation that as a leader of a very large school district in Kansas, they may not always have that perspective. We also talk through things that are happening at the legislature and how our organizations can work together to strengthen public education, and just ways that we can problem solve together so that things don't become a larger problem than they need to be.